Hello, welcome to Old Virginia Homes. Today we're visiting another Washington family home. This one began in the 1760s as the home of Charles Washington, brother to George. But this house changed course about 30 years after it was built, when its quiet rooms transformed into something altogether different, a lively tavern. Before there were hotels, motels, VRBOs, there were taverns. And here in Virginia, these were places where our young nation happily gathered over grub and grog, or at this establishment, Glasgow punch. But they also argued and sometimes fought, bringing out the best and worst in human nature. And in places like this, politics found its voice. Here, news of revolution, discourse about leadership, and debates about a country still finding itself passed between members of the Washington family, merchants, soldiers, and travelers. Join me as we visit the Rising Sun Tavern, an old Virginia home in Fredericksburg. Let's go. The story of this house begins in the early 1760s, when it was built for Charles Washington, the youngest brother of George. Charles acquired 2 lots in 1761 and built this 1.5-story frame dwelling, modest but representative of the growing prosperity of Fredericksburg during the Colonial period. Charles married his cousin, Mildred Thornton, in 1757, and the couple had 4 children who survived into adulthood: Augustine, Samuel, Francis, and Mildred. While Charles Washington and his family lived here, the house was not merely a private residence, but a hub of political influence. Charles was active in civic affairs. He served as a magistrate in Spotsylvania County, was a vestryman and warden at St. George's Episcopal Church, and was a trustee of Fredericksburg. He also supported the Patriot cause, and his brother George is known to have visited the property. Yet this domestic chapter for the building was relatively brief. By around 1780, Charles Washington left Fredericksburg, and the property passed out of the family's hands, marking the end of its first phase of life. If you'd like to continue to follow Charles Washington and his family after they moved away from Fredericksburg, you can watch my video about Happy Retreat, the house he built in Charlestown, West Virginia, which obviously at the time was still part of Virginia. In 1786, on 80 acres of his adjoining land there, Charles laid out the streets of Charlestown, naming some of them after his family members, including one after his wife Mildred. I'll link the video to Happy Retreat at the end of this video. Back in Fredericksburg, Charles and Mildred initially sold their home to their son, George Augustine Washington, and his wife Frances. They owned the property for 5 years before selling, first to Larkin Smith, and then in 1792, Smith sold the property to Gustavus Brown Wallace. The Wallace family would own the property until 1907. Gustavus, a Revolutionary War veteran, saw a business opportunity in the building. He leased the property to John Frazier, who transformed it into a tavern, known in its earliest days not as the Rising Sun, but as the Golden Eagle. The building's conversion was both architectural and social. This is when it is believed the long front porch was added, inviting guests to enjoy the building's new function as a place of welcome and exchange. These photos and diagrams from the 1930s Historic American Buildings Survey show the property without the long front porch. The porch was added back after an in-depth architectural study gave clues to the earlier configuration. Interestingly, on at least 2 occasions in the tavern's early history, it was run by women. After Fraser died, his wife continued to run the business until 1795. It was then rented and run by James Fisher, and when he died, his wife Martha Fisher took over the business. This insurance policy from 1795 shows not only the layout of the property, but also values the property at $2,665. The original operating license for the tavern required that the keepers provide good, wholesome, and cleanly lodging and diet for travelers, and stablage or pasturage, fodder and food for their horses. They also were not to allow unlawful gaming, and on the Sabbath day they were not to suffer any person to tipple or drink any more than is necessary. The keepers kept to this agreement for a time. The interior arrangement adapted to accommodate travelers. Public rooms on the first floor provided spaces for dining, drinking, and conversation. It also included a post office. The second floor's upper chambers provided shared lodging. Outbuildings, such as kitchens and stables, supported the daily operations of the tavern, forming a compact complex dedicated to hospitality. For approximately 3 decades, the tavern thrived under a succession of operators, each leasing the property and contributing to its reputation as a reliable stopping place in Fredericksburg's busy port town economy. In 1822, the tavern was run by Joseph Verone under the name of the Rising Sun Tavern. And then, in 1827, for reasons unknown, it lost its liquor license and ceased to be used as a tavern. In the years following this, members of the Wallace family continued to lease the former tavern, and it may have functioned as a boarding house for a time. In 1851, Dr. John H. Wallace purchased the property. His heirs owned it until 1907, when they eventually sold the property to the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities, now Preservation, Virginia, marking a turning point in its history. It was then renovated and opened to the public as a museum, and is operated by Washington Heritage Museums, a nonprofit founded in 2012. Today, it is run by knowledgeable, costumed interpreters who educate and entertain guests.
You raise the block up, you just lower this piece and attach the string to the bit down there. That holds the platform up, and so it's set. All you do is you put cheese on the pressure plate inside, go to sleep, wait for the mouse, and if you're asleep, you'll probably get woken up by this loud noise if he steps on the platform. So, pretty loud, and so you can imagine rat traps might be a little bigger than that.
Thank you for visiting the Rising Sun Tavern with me today, an old Virginia home.